think I clean off my work table now and again. And I do. Alright, been waiting for this. Tell you, these flat rate mailing boxes from the post office, it's a good thing they don't have to go cross country, huh? Yeah. It's also a good thing that what I'm unboxing here isn't fragile. Alright, this is from the Claw Antler Hide Incorporated company in Custer, South Dakota. This invoice and some packing fluff, but yeah, oh. No, that is, look at the color. This is why I waited. See the difference? This is the piece that I had. This is the piece that I wanted. There's a lot of it here. As I said, the fella chopped this thing down into good pieces, and I told him anything that was remotely big enough to use for a knife handle to throw in the box. They also sell this stuff. People buy this for dog chews, believe it or not. So your knife handle is going to come out of this main beam section here. But again, to compare what I was originally thinking of and what I'm thinking of now, there's quite a color difference. There was one other item that came today that I ordered, and I wish I'd have thought about this back when I made, well, back quite a while ago, but especially back when I made Brian's knife. That's this little item here. There's a fella out in Washington that makes these, and they're specifically designed to do stamping on leather. So I sent him a PDF of my maker's mark, and this is what he turned out for me. So that's going to be going on my sheaths. Now I'm going to have to, this is made of Delrin, so I'm going to have to make a handle so I can strike it with a mallet, and you know, super glue works real fine on this. So I will affix this to a nice handle that I make, and all my sheaths from this moment on are going to have that mark on them. He does good work. All right, here's where I switch to a hard, straight brass backer, and I back up and I sight down this blade, and I'm looking for little shadows or dips. Now see, there are no scratches, but the shadows are what is left of old scratches. And I want every one of them out of here. You put a mirror polish on this blade and they will show up. But resist the temptation to sit here and concentrate on one spot. Then you will dig a big hole and you'll have a big shadow. You take the whole blade down to that low spot, and it'll be nice and flat. And that's why I switched this piece of brass stock. But anyway, just wanted to show you why I'm doing this and what I'm shooting for before I call this side finished and I step up to 500 from 400. And as I said, when in doubt, jump over on your buffer and buff it, and they'll really show it to you. Alright, now we're looking down, and that is what I'm talking about. This knife is ready for heat treatment. And that is only an 800 grit polish taken then to the emery wheel. But at this point, that's when you're going to see those imperfections I'm talking about that you need to get out before heat treatment. Now the only thing I'm going to do before heat treatment that I've not shown is I'm going to make the false edge here that I've started on, just a little more pronounced, wider, so to speak, and take this top in to where it doesn't come to a sharp cutting edge, but it comes to a rounded kind of peak, I suppose. But that really puts a nice defined line on the knife. I think it's attractive, and it also, due to the design of this knife, it would help it in penetration. This is part of the design. So I draw file that, and I'll show you a few strokes, but it really is nothing fancy at all. Steel cuts like butter compared to how it's going to cut after heat treatment. And I'm going to move up through progressively finer grits of files till I get up to this one. This is one of my favorite files to finish draw filing with. It's double cut on this side, single cut on this side, and it is smooth. It's an old Nicholson, and it's a favorite. I've had it for a long time. Okay, over the noise of my fan, which I could not be in here without, I'm sculpting the guard now. You can barely see a scribe line going through those pinholes, and that is just for me to compare my round off on each side, just to get them evened up. And I flip the knife around and do it on that side too. Okay, well, we pretty much got it ready to go into heat treat. I wanted to get some of this guard rough shape down so I could start working on the scales. So these are the scales I've chosen, and been working them down, and you always lose a little bit of texture when you blend this into the guard. So we're going to round the corners of the guard after we get these glued on, and there'll be a little blend line just right about here, and that'll just disappear. And the same on the other side. There's plenty of extra all the way around. Well, good afternoon, guys. I'm getting ready to wrap up Pat's knife to put it in the furnace and heat treat it. So I've gotten all the bad dirt. You don't have to get it too surgically clean to heat treat. But this is stainless steel heat treating foil, and there are two types. And this is where you need to be careful. This is type 321 stainless steel heat treating foil, and it is good up to about 1900 degrees. And then there is a type 309 heat treating foil that I use for the stainless grades that can go in excess of 1900 degrees. And you have to make sure you use the proper foil. Now I can use the more expensive 309 to do this, but this is only getting up to 1450 degrees, so this stuff is cheaper and will do just fine. Just don't get the two mixed up. And I bought them in different widths just to make sure that I didn't. So I want a piece about, it's a big knife as they go, so I want a piece about that big. So now what I do is just roughly fold it in half. Alright, so what I want to do, and we don't have to wrap this super tight, but I do want it tightened up to where we get, good cooling. So I just take a linoleum roller just to get it as flat as we can, and then I come back here because the knife kind of curves. So I'm just going to take this roller, I'm going to press some of the excess out, that's all. So I start down here. I just use these because they help me not get cut. So I'm just going to form a bend Then I'm going to crimp it shut. I do the ends last. Some knife makers will put a little bit of sawdust inside of this foil pack. Some smear the tang area with just a tiny amount of grease. But I don't think it's going to be necessary. I've never done that, and I've not lost any dimension to decarb when I do this. Okay, so we got the second fold formed. I'm just going to press it flat again. Alright, same thing on the ends. Just form a bend around. Form another bend in the middle of the first one. And then crimp it all shut. That's it. That is one foil wrap knife. And when we take it out of this foil, it is not going to resemble the knives I pull out of the oil tank all on their own. It's going to look nice. It's going to look almost as nice coming out of this foil as it did going in. That's the beauty of foil wrap. It's a poor man's way to get an atmospheric controlled furnace. Okay, we've got Pat's knife in the furnace right now. Temperature is about 1130. We're on our way to 1200, where we're going to sit for about 15 minutes. And then on up to 1475, at which point we're going to let it soak for about another 30 minutes. Now you can modify some of the heat treatment instructions on some of the steel, taking the dimensions into account. Knives are thin in cross section, so they don't need that much time to normalize and then to austinize at the hardening temperature. It just doesn't take that long. There's a bird in my shop. I've got the big overhead garage door open and it's sitting on top of it. The biggest single thing in that shop in there is the opening to the outside, and it keeps flying around high. It'll get the message. And we just crossed over 1400 degrees. And that bird is still, it's flown around in there a few times, but it just can't seem to put two and two together and find that 7-foot high by 10-foot wide hole in the wall. I'm sure it'll find its way out eventually, though. Okay, it's been in there the right amount of time, and I'm going to get it out of there and quench it now. Bird is still in here, by the way. Alright, so here we go. Straight in, and then we move this around. We don't do anything any differently, except we're leaving it in here about 30 seconds versus 15 or 20. Takes just a little bit longer to cool through that foil. Constantly move it. That way the oil right next to it is replaced by oil that hasn't been superheated. Basically, when you pull it out and it stops smoking off, you've left it in there long enough. I've got the drawing oven there in the other room warming up, so let me get the oil wiped off of this, and we'll take it out of the foil pack over there on the bench. I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, still pretty warm. Alright, so I'm just going to cut the end of the foil pack off. It's pretty thick at that seam. There we are. Let me just spread it open. I'm going to grab me some needle nose pliers. I don't know if it'll come out this way or if I have to open it down the sides too. You guys have asked me if they can reuse this foil, and no, there is some ingredient in the foil that kind of cooks out that allows it to be heat treating foil. So yeah, it's one use only. I may as well just go ahead and cut myself because I know it's going to happen. I'm going to get some aviators because I have to cut that seam, and for oil quench steels you do want to wrap them tightly because this needs to cool quickly relative to other steels. Alright, now I think it'll come out of that foil. Hey, success, I cut myself. There we are. Okay, now the acid test. You hear that? That is as hard as a piece of glass, and while it's still too hot for me to touch, I'm going to get that over into the drying oven. It's warmed up now, and it's going to sit in there for a couple of hours. Knife stayed nice and straight. Pretty heavy bodied knife though, so I really wasn't that concerned with it. But okay, we're going to get this into the drawer. But that is that's one heat treated knife. Now it is a knife. Okay, it's out of the drawing furnace. So that's going to finish out to about a Rockwell 60, 58 to 60. So one of the byproducts of foil wrapping is you get these color streaks, but the ones you can see show you the color that you're wanting, that purplish blue. But it's tempered or drawn through and through. So it is it's letting this anvil suck the heat out of this thing. Still too hot to touch. But we didn't lose any dimension in here, and all that discoloration I can literally take over to the emery wheel and buff it out. So I'm going to quit messing with it before I drop it onto the floor. Okay, knife came through heat treatment, and I've gotten it cleaned up. I'm still smudgy, but this isn't final polish, but it's close. It's close enough now to where I can attach this guard for real. And I've cleaned all inside of these mating surfaces with acetone. And then I've scuffed the inside where the guard meets the metal in there. I've scuffed that just with some, I think 180. But it's gonna get the solder something to melt into and get a grip on and stay there. But I'm going to attach the guard, then I'm just going to flow some flux down around in here and solder seal this. So I've got my pins in there, and before I inserted my pins, I took a diamond, just a conical diamond burr, and I expanded these holes. They're funnel shaped basically, and we're going to fill it with this metal pin. So the same as always, just any good ball peen hammer. And you want to start peening, and you leave about equal amounts out each side, roughly a 1/16, something like that. You don't want them too long because you don't want the pins to bend over. You want them to flatten out. So you start with your strikes, kind of light at first, and just start getting that head form where you mushroom it. And once again, you do this on a substantial piece of steel so that whatever you do on this side of the pin, the anvil is doing on the opposite end. And we're just going to do this until we feel pretty sure that we have upset that metal to where it fills that hole and it becomes a rivet. And that is what really holds the guard onto the blade. And again, the solder seal is simply that, a solder seal. It's a very low melt solder. It won't affect the heat treatment of the steel. It doesn't have a lot of holding power because of that. It's not like silver solder, but again, its job is to seal gaps. So once you get everything set, you can go ahead and hit it pretty darn hard. Just be sure you don't want to miss, and you don't want to hit here or something like that and put a ding in there that you're going to curse yourself for. Use a hammer that you're comfortable with, and this little Estwing ball peen hammer is my favorite for balance, and I love the well, you're not going to tear it up. I've got plenty of wood handled hammers up there, including a nice Vaughn, and this is just my go-to ball peen hammer. I've probably done enough, but then, as I've always said, just when you think you're done peening, peen a little bit more. You really can't overdo this. Alright. You can see there, that's what they flattened out to look like. So we're going to go ahead and dress the ends of it off. Then we're going to brush. We're going to heat it gently. We're going to brush some flux in here, and then we're going to flow some low melt solder to seal this. Okay, with just a gentle heat from a propane torch, not any kind of MAP gas torch or anything like that. We'll just start bringing this up to temperature, and it doesn't take long to get there. I like to creep up. Now you'll see some coloration in the steel because it's going to get to around 400 degrees. So I just work my way around, and a little blob of solder will melt off. And then I just keep it molten and work it around, and it flows into every place I need it to flow. And I take my acid brush and I just move that solder around. And what you do is you end up tinning a lot of these surfaces. There we go. We've got a great flow now. Like I said, this solder scrubs off really easily. It's a very soft product. Alright, I'm going to come back, and this discoloration here will buff off. So I will be back in just a few minutes when we're ready to start putting the handles on. It's getting close, Pat. Okay, I gave everything a wash down with some baking soda and water just to neutralize that flux, which is pretty acidic. Then we just cleaned it up and buffed it. Now this is only a 220 finish on that. That's just what I knocked the pins off with, just to get the flux and stuff off there. And I just ran it over an emery wheel, so it's nowhere near finish polish. But I just wanted you guys to see. Did a really good job. Everything is solder sealed now and permanently attached. You can't see the pins, and you won't. It's the same material, 4/16 stainless pin and guard. But yeah, it's going to go pretty quickly now.